This is Ron Sipsick. This is the second part of a three-part series on consumer choice. We begin the analysis by looking at a diagram that we ended part one with. This is a budget line. This budget line was derived from some budget data, $10 for the hypothetical buyer. The buyer was facing a price of $2 for coffee and a price of $1 for rolls. Notice that we determine the extremes of the budget line, 5 on this extreme and 2 on this extreme, by taking income and dividing it by the price. So the income was $10 and the price of rolls was $1, and that gave us the 10. The income again is $10. The price of coffee is $2, and that's how we got the $5. Also note that we determined a consumer equilibrium point in the first part of the series, and that was based not only on income and prices but on marginal utility data. Notice that 3 coffee, 4 rolls is optimal. Why? Because that is where total utility is maximized. And in that first part we showed how to calculate total utility and how we derive 4140. In this part of the series, we want to take a look at what happens when a buyer, or if a buyer, moves away from the consumer equilibrium point. And in the process, we're going to take a good look at what is called marginal benefit, marginal cost analysis. So let's go ahead and dive in. Below this diagram, I would like to set up a table. This is a table that we presented in the first part of the series, but I would like to pull it back up and remind you, if there are 0 coffee purchased by the buyer will buy 10. 1 coffee, 8. 2 coffee, 6. 3 coffee, 4. 4 coffee, 2. 5 coffee, sorry about that, 5 coffee, 0. Alright, now that 5 is looking pretty poorly. I bet I could use my eraser and take care of that. Why don't I do that? So there we go. We'll take care of that 5 and put a new 5 in there. Alright, very good. Technical difficulty over. Back to our regular programming, and let's put a 5 in there. Okay, very good. So we see here that 1 coffee equals 2 rolls. Every time a coffee is consumed, 2 rolls are given up. 2 rolls, as we said back in part 1, is the opportunity cost. Now, this is very, very interesting. Yes, 2 rolls are the opportunity cost of 1 coffee, but different rolls have different values, which means different coffees cost the buyer different amounts. Now you say, well, no, every coffee is priced at 2, but remember, the price is not the true cost. The opportunity cost is the value of what is given up when a choice is made. So different coffees will cost different amounts because different rolls will be given up. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. This is very interesting. Again, the optimal point on this budget line is 3 coffee, 4 rolls. The question arises, what happens if the buyer were to go from 3 coffee, 4 rolls to 4 coffee, 2 rolls? Well, the buyer picks up the 4th coffee. And what is that 4th coffee worth? Well, in the data we gave in the last segment, that coffee is worth 620 U-Tils. However, in buying that coffee, the buyer is going to give up the 4th roll and the 3rd roll. So the 4th and 3rd rolls are given up. Notice the buyer can have 4 rolls with 3 coffee, but can only have 2 rolls with 4 coffee, which means the 4th and 3rd rolls are lost. What are they worth? Well, the 4th roll is worth 360, but that's lost. And the 3rd roll is worth 420, and that's lost. So 780 U-Tils are lost when that fourth coffee is actually purchased. Now notice the difference. we can do what is called marginal analysis here. The benefit versus the cost. The choice here is buy the fourth coffee. What was the benefit of that choice? 620 utils. But what was the cost of that choice? 780 utils. So the net effect is this is a poor choice. Why? Because the level of utils go down, total level of utils go down by 160. Now, if we go back up to the budget line, we can see that that's exactly what happened. As we move from 3 coffee 4 rolls to 4 coffee 2 rolls, what happens? The total utility drops from 4140 to 3980. That's a drop of 160 utils. When we go from 4140 to 3980, that's a drop of 160 utils. Why? Because a coffee was drunk that was less beneficial than the rolls that were given up. And the story gets worse. If we go from 4.2 to 5.0, it's even worse. Notice total utility drops to 3,500. And I simply calculated this by adding up the first 5 MUs in the table we presented back in the first part. But we can again look at this. Let's do it. So let me use a different color here. If we go from 4 coffee 2 rolls, if the buyer goes to 5 coffee 0 rolls, what happens? The buyer picks up the 5th coffee, which is worth what? The 5th coffee is worth 500 utils. But what is lost? What is lost, I have to come out here with this, what is lost is the second and first rolls. Well, what are they worth? The second and first rolls, well, the first roll is worth 500, so that's loss, and the second roll is worth 480. So the total loss is 980. So by consuming that 5th cup of coffee, the buyer gets product worth 500 utils to him, but loses product worth 980 utils. And you can see the net loss. Let's go ahead and, sorry about that, let's just go ahead and write that out. Benefit, cost, the choice is buy the 5th coffee. What's the benefit? The benefit is 500 utils. The 5th coffee provides the buyer with 500 utils. But what's the cost? The cost is 980 utils because we lose the first and second rolls. Clearly this is a poor choice because there's a net loss of what? There's a net loss of 480 utils as a result of that choice. And that in fact is what happened up here on the budget line when we moved from this point to this point. So in moving from here to here, there's a loss of 480. We go from 3980 to 3500. Now this raises a very interesting point. And I just want to summarize this very, very quickly. I'll just put a little 4-column table. And coffee, marginal benefit, marginal cost, net effect. And we'll go 3, 4, 5. Now we have actually completed the numbers. Let me go with a different color here. The marginal benefit of the 4th coffee is 620. The marginal cost is what? 780. The net effect is minus 160. The marginal benefit of the fifth coffee is 500. The marginal cost is 980. The net effect is minus 480. So what do we see here? We see that as we consume more coffee, the benefit is dropping, but the cost, the opportunity cost, is increasing. Why? Because we're giving up increasingly valuable roles. Now, what is the marginal benefit of the third coffee? We can look at our marginal utility table, and we can see that that is actually 720. If we take that right off the table, well, what's the marginal cost? Well, when we consume, let's take a look at our little table up here. When we're at two coffee, we can have 6 rolls. If we go to 3 coffee, we have to give up what? The 6th and 5th rolls. Well, what are the 6th and 5th rolls worth? The 6th roll is worth 180, and the 5th roll is worth 280. So together, they are worth 460. Why was buying the third coffee a good idea? Because it benefited the buyer more than it cost the buyer. By how much? 260 utils, the difference here. Why did the buyer not buy the 4th coffee or the 5th coffee? Why? Because those units cost the buyer more than they benefited the buyer. This relationship is very, very common in many, many, many applications. That as you do more of something, some activity, you produce more of something, or you do something, maybe you're not producing something, you're just, for instance, polluting. Well, let me turn it around. Let's say trying to clean up a river. There's a diminishing benefit to trying to clean up a river. I know this is hard for people to understand, but the closer you get the river to perfect cleanliness, the less and less the benefit is. You know, the difference between 99% clean and 97% clean is probably not very significant to most people. However, the cost in pushing the river from 97% clean to 99% clean might be phenomenally high to get it incrementally cleaner. And so what we often find in many, many settings is this relationship, and we see it here. We'll just quickly sketch this, that this is Q, this is the quantity or the volume of some activity. Buying coffee, cleaning up the river. And this is some measure of it could be dollars, it could be whatever. It could be utility. But what we see is the benefit declines and the cost increases. And so long as the benefit of doing this activity is greater than the cost, it makes sense to do it, whatever it is. So this is optimal. However, if the cost of the activity should exceed the benefit, if the marginal cost should exceed the benefit, then it isn't worth doing. So doing anything out here doesn't pay because it costs more than it benefits us. So the buyer discovered this. It doesn't pay to buy the 4th and 5th cups of coffee. Why? Because they cost the buyer more in utility than they benefit the buyer. We will see this principle later, in our study of economics. We can see it in environmental economics. We can see it in production, whether the firm should produce additional units or not. You can see it in labor markets. Should companies hire additional workers? We only want to do something, hire a worker, produce output, engage in some act of social welfare, for instance, adding police officers to reduce crime, cleaning up rivers, whatever activity we're talking about, there'll be a diminishing benefit usually to that and an increasing cost. All right, thank you.